Hello there. Oh heck, I'm in a bank. In the safe. Well, it's a big safe. I think they call it a vault. I've managed to stuff about £1 million into various pockets. Oh, but it's time to go. I'm only kidding. I'm not in a bank, I'm in a pub. In a pub at 10 to 8 in the morning. And you know, there's certain similarities between pubs and banks. We sometimes think of pubs at one time there was practically one on every street corner. Well, it really wasn't that long ago that banks were pretty much the same, in that you almost had one on every street corner. But of course, these days we're losing a lot of banks. This is a video about old Glasgow bank buildings and the art and the architecture that goes along with them. You know, Glasgow is full of Victorian architecture. The city's famous for it. And while we have destroyed a lot of buildings along the way over the years, like many fine buildings go, we have managed to retain a lot of stunning buildings that have some age to them, and many of these actually were built for banks, whether bank branches or head offices for banks. And the city centre here is kind of pretty much full of buildings that you would look at, you think that's pretty stunning, but you might not know that it was once a bank. So that's what we're going to do today. Incidentally, I'm in the counting house here, just in George Square in Glasgow. Used to be the Bank of Scotland, and now it's a pub. How times change.
The Bank of Scotland building that is now the Counting House pub was designed by J.T. Roshed and built in the late 1860s. The building pretty much set the scene for how this part of George Square would look. It's very hard to imagine any building just so grand and opulent, both inside and out. But in fact, Glasgow has any number of similar magnificent structures built for banks. And although we can't always get to see any interior architectural remnants, we can still marvel at their stunning exteriors. Like this building in Royal Exchange Square, built for the Royal Bank of Scotland in the 1820s. Of course, not all banks were built like palaces. Some were small bank branches, a bit like shops, the only thing differentiating them from retail premises on either side being an external coat of granite, sometimes covering the whole facade, like this one at the corner of Great Western Road and Melrose Street, or covering just up to the bottom of the windows, like this one at the corner of Dumbarton Road and Crow Road. As you may see, both of these premises are no longer banks. In fact, of the many buildings shown in this video, not one remains a bank today. This photo shows the Shawlands branch of the Royal Bank of Scotland at 1087 Pollokshaws Road in 1939. On this occasion we only have a granite facing for about a foot up from the pavement, but the presence of granite does seem quite typical for many old bank facades. Would you just look at how prim and proper and neat all those shops look? The same view today would perhaps make you gasp aloud. But not only has the bank gone, we now have a messy mishmash of shop signs and colours of various size and position that is not so much a row of shops as something of a retail carnival. It really is an argument for keeping all shop signage at the same height, where the building designers intended those signs to go, and I really don't know why city councils don't exercise more control over the appearance of shop facades. Which do you think looks better? The old view or this modern monstrosity? As I've previously said, at one time there were banks on many street corners, and we only have to examine old maps to reveal their true extent. This 1933 map shows the area between Glasgow Cross and Glasford Street. Bank, banks, bank, bank, and bank. Indeed, here's the bank building shown on the map at the corner of Trongate and Glasford Street. What a magnificent structure. Completed in 1903 for the National Bank of Scotland and bristling with carved stone and sculpture, it is so stunningly typical of many of Glasgow's old bank buildings. The National Bank of Scotland was based in Edinburgh. They joined forces with the Commercial Bank of Scotland in 1959 to create the National and Commercial Bank, and were swallowed up by the Royal Bank of Scotland 10 years later. If we venture further into the city in this 1934 map, the number of banks is quite astonishing. There are 19 banks shown here. Can you see them all? In the block bordered by Renfield Street, West Regent Lane, Hope Street and West Regent Street, banks and pubs are fighting for dominance, with 2 on 2 street corners. Indeed, at the junction of Hope Street and West Regent Street, just up from the Potstill pub, Google Street View reveals the unmistakable granite facade of an old bank. The corner of Queen Street and Ingram Street is of some interest. Here it is around 1880, when it was owned by the British Linen Bank. Here it is again around 1906, still owned by the British Linen Bank, but with the significant addition of another floor, a cupola and statues. This very grand building was later demolished and replaced with, brace yourself, this concrete embarrassment. The photo dates to 1988, and as you can see, it was owned by the Bank of Scotland, who took over the British Linen Bank in 1971. Thankfully, this building was later demolished and now replaced with, this curvy bit of glass that is not a bank. Just along Ingram Street, we have more stunning examples of Glasgow's old bank architecture. At 191 Ingram Street, we have a huge building constructed in 1842 for the Glasgow Ship Bank, which later merged with the Glasgow Union Bank to create the Union Bank of Scotland. This building was their headquarters for 73 years. Like many buildings, it has seen many changes and alterations over the years. It was indeed the city's high court for a while. But while the frontage is a joy to behold, the rear view from Virginia Street is something else. And just along Ingram Street, at the Glasford Street corner is yet another fine example of just why Glasgow is renowned the world over for its fine architecture. Designed in the 1890s by J.J. Burnett and built for the Savings Bank of Glasgow, this is a building so full of carved stuff that it probably merits a video all on its own. The building was added to an existing bank building in Glasford Street, which had been designed in the 1860s by John Burnett, father of J.J. The Savings Bank of Glasgow, or Glasgow Savings Bank, was the largest of its type in the UK. It later became the Trustees Savings Bank, or TSB. But, and this is a big but, on this occasion we have the luxury of a view inside this bank around 1900. There can be no words to describe the beauty of what you see before you. Another old interior photo shows the bank at 67 Bridge Street in premises now called the Savings Bank, although not a bank. The building dates to the mid-19th century, and this part became the south branch of the Savings Bank of Glasgow in 1888. J.J. Burnett may have had a hand in this bank too. Just look at that interior. Absolutely stunning. Another of the many bank buildings of note in the city centre can be found at the Herculean Street, West Campbell Street corner. This is how that area looked in 1979. Really not that long ago. We're looking at the corner of West Campbell Street and Home Street, with the bank building in question on the right-hand side by the police box. The same view today looks very different, and the bank building on Argyll Street is the only building left. That said, I'm unsure how long it will last, as a structural crack is evident running the whole height of the building, and there is evidence of ground subsidence in the pavement running the whole length of the building on Argyll Street. It was built as a branch of the Clydesdale Bank in 1892. Like many of Glasgow's fine old buildings, it has some foreign influence, said to be in an Italian Renaissance style. I sometimes wonder if Scotland ever had a style of its own. Before leaving the city centre, I just want to show you one more building, although this time not built for a bank. It sits at 42 Virginia Street and, like so many of these buildings, is absolutely stunning. Again, we have foreign influence. It is said to be in an Italian Renaissance palazzo style, whatever that is, and built originally in the 1860s for the Glasgow Gaslight Company. Various companies occupied the building, including the Union Savings Bank of Scotland. It's hard to imagine the amount of work that went into the design and building of that structure, now largely unnoticed by Glaswegians and visitors to the city.
Well, the building just behind me on Argyll Street in the Anderson area of Glasgow is really just a typical example of the sort of frontages you get on some of these old bank buildings, full of statues and little works of art that just make the whole building look very attractive and appealing. You would want to go in and deposit your money there. It's only one of two buildings left in Anderson, or in this part of Anderson. Everything else is just housing. Just a lovely building.
There are way too many old bank buildings of note in Glasgow for me to include them all. but here's a small sample to give you a flavour. British Linen Bank, High Street, 1895. Commercial Bank, Gordon Street, 1855. National Commercial Bank of Scotland, St Enoch Square, 1907. Clydesdale Bank, St Vincent Place, 1870s. British Linen Bank, Gorbals, 1900. Glasgow Savings Bank, Bridgeton Cross, 1900. Bank of Scotland Chambers, St Vincent Street, 1920s. Glasgow Savings Bank, New City Road, 1909. One building of particular interest is Langside Halls on the edge of Queen's Park. Built originally in Queen Street in 1847 for the National Bank of Scotland, the whole building was dismantled stone by stone, all 70,000 of them, in 1901 and moved to its current location. Seemingly the move came about because of a combination of circumstances. The bank wanted to move to different premises, the building was sold, and Glasgow Corporation wanted to build a new public building in the south of the city. This one would do the job. It's a stunning building, and although it lost a few architectural features during the move, it remains as a typical example of early bank architecture and the sort of Victorian structural elegance for which Glasgow is famous.
Well, I visited quite a lot of bank buildings for this video. Too many to actually put in the video, which is a good thing. It kind of shows that there's perhaps a lot of nice buildings still remaining. But my intention was to end here in Govan, at the building just behind me, with the words, of all the bank buildings that I have visited for this video, this one in Govan is the only one that is still a bank. Or at least, I'm sure it was the last time I looked. While it still bears the words Bank of Scotland on the outside of the building, it is clearly shut. Like practically every single bank building that I visited today, and yesterday in fact. It's a 2-day video. Oh, how times do indeed change. And I'm afraid not necessarily for the better. At least the building's still here. Well, hello. Come on into my office. Was it a loan you were wanting? A little bit extra cash, perhaps? So that was the art and architecture of old Glasgow banks. And here in the counting house where I started this video, this is where I'm ending the video, you probably won't find a better spot in the whole city to demonstrate just how stunningly beautiful and architecturally magnificent some of Glasgow's old banks used to be. These days you perhaps can't get inside just so many of them to appreciate what's going on inside and the beauty that there once was. But certainly in many occasions, in many instances, we can see these banks from the outside, and in most cases the outside was every bit as beautiful as the inside. Banks don't mess about as far as looking good is concerned. And I suppose as time goes by, I dare say over the next couple of decades, money will gradually be phased out, and you will perhaps wonder what the role of banks will be. They seem to be vanishing off our high streets at a heck of a rate. You wonder what the future holds with regard to banks and money. But thankfully, they built these magnificent buildings and we can still appreciate them today. I'm Eddie Burns. Bye for now.